Hello, my name is Klaus Overmeyer from Urban Catalyst. I'm a skilled gardener and landscape architect and urbanist based in Berlin. And I want to talk to you today about participation and planning. First of all, I will start with a brief insight into our office. Who are we and how do we work? The roots, Urban Catalyst is rooted in an urban research project on the potential of temporary use. And this is, for example, an image of the former Palace of Republic from the GDR. And within our research project, we made a proposal for an interim use of this palace. What was very specific about Berlin at that time was that the city was in a big euphoria. After reunification, it became capital of Germany again. And the authorities, they made plans for 6 million inhabitants. But after 8 years, the population still remained at 3.4 million inhabitants, but the authorities made big plans, and the paradox was, on the other hand, nothing happened. On the other hand, these vacant sites became vital breeding grounds for numerous temporary uses. This is the same site near Berlin East Station, and the specificness about these uses were they were completely unplanned. So you had 100% activity, but completely unplanned. In the 90s, Berlin has been a mecca for temporary uses. And within our research project, we investigated how these people appropriated space, how they gave new access to this space, and how they prepared a breeding ground for not only cultural uses and public uses, but also for economic activities, for housing, for new entrepreneurship, even in very centrally located areas like here in Potsdamer Platz. This picture was taken, I think, at the end of the 90s, and you could play golf in the city center of Berlin. Of course, you had entrepreneurial uses, housing projects, or migrant economies, and they formed a new structure and a new image. Poor but sexy. You may know this image from the former mayor of Berlin, Klaus Overmeyer. We published some books on Urban Catalyst, on the potentials of temporary use, but also on their impact on urban development. And in this publication, Raumunternehmen, we investigated how these users became do-it-yourself project developers, and we investigated their input on urban development. Meanwhile, we in our work are still focused on the actors and the users of space, and we are interested in how users produce space beyond architecture and beyond strategic planning. We have 4 fields of business in our office. We deal a lot with strategic planning. So it's if a city goes to a psychologist and asks, well, I don't feel good, how will I develop in future? This is a very relevant topic for a lot of German cities and European cities right now. We work at the interface of participation and planning. We do urban and spatial research, policy advice for international countries, and we are just about to start an Urban Catalyst Academy, where we try to give our knowledge and experience to other organizations, municipalities, or companies. We are about 22 people in our office, and last year I changed the structure to a collaborative working organization. Before I was chief on my own, and then I asked my colleagues, who of you wants to take more responsibility, and 10 people said, well, I want to take more responsibility, and they bought some chairs, and the idea is that I give all my shares to the employees so that they become owner of the company. And our motto is practice what you preach. So if we work in participatory projects, we think a lot, how can we form a breeding ground for a participatory organization, an agile organization, which is based on feedback, on teamwork, and on a common development. It's a long way. You cannot do this by one decision, but I would say it's worth. This is one of our core diagrams, how we understand planning. Here on the right-hand side, you see the traditional coordinates of planning. We plan detailed space for end consumers, and we all want that our plannings last for 100 years. But in our work, we think these coordinates are quite worth, but we have to prolong them. We have to work more process-orientated. We have to integrate space producers, not only space consumers, in our plannings, and we have to take more into consideration the unplanned, the unexpected things like economy which changes, which have a strong impact on our planning. We assist cities, business and organizations in sustainable and participatory projects to change urban environments. Where there are more and more global challenges in urban planning. This is a very crucial metaphor for us. We compare the global conditions to a weather map. It's extremely dynamic and complex, and there's a close link between the microclimate and the macroclimate. And if you transfer this to our planning context, we are now focused and confronted with a great transformation, 21. So there are plenty global challenges which have a strong impact on our individual lives. And if we take the city as scale, cities and regions, they have become very important platforms and mediators to transfer or to intermediate between these global challenges and these individual lifestyles. And for us as planners, this means that we can't no longer concentrate on the shape of a house or a building only, but we also have to change to have the neighborhood, individual lifestyles, but also these global effects in mind. Just to sum up some of them: demographic change. Kiev is growing very much while the rural areas are shrinking, probably, like in Germany. We are confronted in a lot of cities with a strong social, spatial polarization. We have to integrate people who move to the city. In Germany, there are a lot of cities who face a reurbanization of the city center, and we all are about to transform our cities. Climate and energy policy is a core question of our time, not only in the city, but also in the country. And our cities undergo a strong economical change, not only due to digitalization and new technologies, but also to new tendencies like urban manufacturing or the accumulation of global capitals, which also has a strong impact on city centers. For example, in Berlin, it becomes really hard to afford a life in the city center. And this is, of course, a question of justice. Who is allowed to live here? Only the people who can afford it. And how can we balance these social polarizations in future? I do like this scheme by Fredmund Malik very much. He's an economist at St. Gallen University. And this scheme illustrates the competition between the driving factors of the old system, which depends on fossil resources and a growing economy, and on the other hand, we have new factors which will determine our future life. And of course, we do not know how these lines go in future. And right now we are in an area of a high complexity, but also high uncertainty. We don't know, shall we still rely on the old system and extrapolate the existing resources to the future, or do we radically have to shift our behavior, our modes of planning and living? And do we have to shift the key resources? So this is a crucial question of our time. Within this background, why do cities need a vision and an overall strategic plan? If you take a look at the planning culture in European cities, you will find out that a lot of metropolitan areas, regions, but also big and smaller cities, that they really focus strategic plans. And if you, for example, compare the future plan of Copenhagen to the one of Berlin, you also see difference. They all, of course, have the climate change, the change of the economic structure in mind, but you see that, for example, Copenhagen sees its future in the Baltic Sea area and in a strong regional cooperation with Malmö. And Berlin is still a bit drunken from the euphoria of the reunifications in the 90s. They still focus on a reconstruction of a city center, but the tendency is more and more to have relevant transformation areas in the periphery and in the outskirts. This is an important line to the southeast, to the new built airport Tempelhof, which has not been open yet. For cities within these strategic plans, it is very important to find out what are existing treasures and resources, and how can we work with these local talents. This is a map of the city of Bern. And within these strategic processes, a lot of cities launch public debates on their future. And for the metropolitan areas, it's quite important to integrate the public attitude and to generate one. Then these visions have to become spatial. So these strategic visions are combined with a spatial plan which indicates certain focus areas or transformation areas or opportunity areas, like in London. And these areas, they show that one has to set priorities and to prioritize certain strategic areas. It can be compared to an urban acupuncture. And of course, these cities have spatial maps for different themes, for the economic structure, for mixed uses, for social development or neighborhood development, and also the development of the green areas. And they work like a navigation system to steer the future development of cities. It is very important to trigger a strong debate with citizens and other stakeholders, for example, on the housing policy or on new modes of participation and actor-based planning. If we sum up, what is the conclusion for us as planners? Where do we position ourselves? So on the one hand, of course, we are all living in existing cities with a long history and a long tradition, and there's also a strong power which pushes us to extrapolate the past. On the other hand, there are more and more actors, institutions, organizations, civil activists or entrepreneurs and companies in the city who have a strong opinion how the city should look like, and they also have a strong impact. And moreover, since 2 or 3 decades, we have a counterwind of this great transformation telling us, well, you can't plan your city as you did before, you have to come to a radical shift. And so what is the conclusion for us as planners? I can't give you an answer, but I think that our profession finds itself within these different driving forces. Cities demand more participation. You all know these Fridays for Futures demonstrations, and the limitation of resources has become a common denominator for a lot of people. People claim for this radical shift, and they claim to design their own future, especially the young people. And there's also a close link to Romada, to me, because the questions we discuss, they are about an increasing matter of public concerns. So how can we share space which is limited? How can we create affordable housing? How can we have good air and water and ecology for all people in the city? So the debate on the commons and also the tragedy of the commons is arising anew. If we have a closer look at the actors, we can witness or observe a shift from the Mercedes star to a fried egg. So the Mercedes star is our classical system with the share between market, state and civic society. And nowadays a fourth space is popping up, which has its character between the typical categories, and we have a lot of actors who enter this new space. So there are these activists, and you as CANaction Festival are an activist as well. So you enter open spaces and you make your own designs. you come to, maybe you might become an do-it-yourself developer, so people who start as space pioneers and who suddenly start to develop a site. And of course, the municipality itself, it plays an important role. Usually they have no budgets, but they have radar screen and good networks. They can bring different actors from culture, from economy and social society together, and they can also negotiate. I think events like this one, they are important platforms to exchange ideas and how to design the middle of the fried egg. The new generation of citizens, this is our experience, they are highly self-organized, they bring a really strong expertise in relevant questions, and they are capable not only of raising their voice, but also of appropriating space, setting up organizations, and also investing and organizing money for transforming spaces. If we look at participation, well, of course we have this experience from the 60s and the 70s with Jane Jacobs reclaiming the streets and a lot of participatory projects. But then in the 90s, at least in Germany, we had a strong focus on the planning itself, and the planners informed the people about their plan. This was participation, and maybe they reacted or not, but usually this does not have a strong effect, an impact on planning. Today, at least in some cities, we found out that a lot of people raise their voice before planning, and that a lot of planners do not want to dare to start planning without the public opinion. And our job is to invent new processes, how to integrate planning and participation in an iterative process. We at Urban Catalyst have invented a lot of formats and tools how we do it. This is, for example, a public forum on the future development of a 120-hectare big size in Cologne. And you see a planning team which is presenting its ideas to a broader public of 400 people, and they really had to find arguments for their planning, and they entered into a deep discussion with the public. At the beginning of these participatory projects, we start with a process design, and so you see we do not only design spaces, but in future I think we have to put more stress on designing processes. Usually you have different phases. You have an exploration phase, but also a phase where you create different options and varieties which you have to evaluate. And in the end you try to create and define a common vision. What is very specific about these projects is that there is throughout the whole process that there's a strong interaction between dialogue and planning, and we do not come up with a final product, but with a lot of products, and the vision, the idea, the design, it is being created step by step. It is growing, and everybody can see how the result grows. This is also very, I think it's a crucial shift for our profession, because we are used to make the best design and to be very creative with our genius design, but usually we come up with one-way solutions. and nobody can realize how our design came into being. We do the process design together with people, mostly with our clients, and of course this design is a navigation system for the whole process, and it's very relevant to communicate this process, this navigation system to the public. So everybody knows where the process is, what are the next thresholds and milestones, and this is a good guideline for processes. Yeah, they can also be complicated, and into these processes we embed a lot of different planning and participation formats. We have a big library of different formats we implement. For example, one format is a site safari. So we are convinced that it is very important to bring a debate on the future of a site to the site itself. So here we rented a bus with colleagues and went with a bus to a square which should be transformed. We also launch debates on specific issues like new work, vital neighborhoods, the future of green areas, and so on. And our experience is that the citizens, that they are well informed and they are the real experts. We take these results and they become part of the assignment for the planning task. This is another example from Switzerland where we created a space for discussion. Drinking and eating is the most important thing to get into a good discussion. Sometimes we squat sites for a whole week, and if you sleep there, if you are there the whole day, you get into contact with a lot of people who do not come to events like this or panel discussions. You can easily get into discussion with them, and usually we build up a base camp like this, and we also work with prototyping. So the people, there's a workshop in this base camp, and the people have the opportunity to realize their ideas and to experiment the site. So you get a direct feedback by experimenting space. We also visualize different ideas and models together with the people, and an important step is of course to transfer all these positions and opinions into a plan or into a future development. And a lot of people are scared of participation because it's you can't control the process. You usually get a confetti of ideas and opinions, and how do you decide which idea is the best? And we see our job to filter these ideas and to transfer them into a spatial language. So usually we make hand drawings and we locate the ideas and the critiques also in a map, but we also draw more abstract maps indicating the dynamic of a neighborhood, for example. So you have certain dynamics where with a good economy or with new young people entering a city district. But there are also, of course, areas or waiting lands who stagnate and who don't change. And sometimes you get these weather fronts within the city, and you also can get storm and conflicts there. So this is very the weather maps are a good means to communicate the dynamics in a city and to get into a discussion on gentrification, on affordable housing, on the right to the city. Well, this is a means for debating. When we draw these maps, we give them back to the public and we ask for feedback. And so we succeed in easily gapping the bridge between citizen attitude and planning expertise. These drawings become, for example, basis for competitions, for the assignments, for planning competitions or further planning assignments. On the other hand, we work a lot with other colleagues, with other architectural offices or landscape architects, and if we integrate them into these processes, we ask them not to do beamer presentations as I do, but to show their ideas in a walkable model. Then their ideas become very haptical and the public can easily react on the ideas. It's not abstract. Everybody understands a model, and the interesting thing is also that people understand how an idea arises. On the other hand, we match the public with the planners by idea markets, and we don't ask the people only, well, what do you think can be better or how can we improve the public space? Then they say, well, put more lights or put a bench there. But we have a kind of idea tuning phase of 4 weeks, and within this phase, the people have the opportunity to form a group and to develop a project which they present on a poster. So, for example, it's a project for an urban garden, or it's a project for a new kindergarten, or a housing project, a cycle line. And the planners usually, they are enthusiastic, really enthusiastic about these ideas. And this is an image from KCIP from Rotterdam after such an idea market, and they really grasped and took up the ideas of the different initiatives, and they integrated them into the further planning process. Of course, in the end, it's very relevant to make these results visible, to communicate them, and also to show how the results are growing. Transparency is quite important, and also the quality of visualization. Last but not least, some things we learned, some lessons we learned. So involve people and stakeholders in planning processes. Design these processes before you design spaces, and allow a certain flexibility of these processes. Communicate transparently and with a low threshold. Different formats for different questions, and test one by one. Have fun. Thank you very much. Maybe you have a question, or was it cold coffee I talked about for you?
Ну що, 1, 2, 3, 4. Є питання?
Who's your client for this type of jobs usually? Who basically invites you to do participation and strategic planning?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Who's your client for?
My client, okay. We
Usual
usually work for municipalities, but now we more and more work also for private property owners and investors, because they realize their planning, they get more acceptance if they start with participations. Participation. Yeah. But it's they are private property owners, they are not used to this participatory projects because they have a private aim and they do not act in a public interest. And participation has always to do with a common interest, a common vision. And private investors, they have maybe they often have a financial vision, but meanwhile they realize that a project becomes more sustainable if they start with participation.
Thank you. І маємо ще час на одне питання або коментар. Бачу вашу руку, давайте ви до мене, я до вас. Так і зійдемось, як Мікеланджело.
Berlin has one of the greatest sample of projects, informal projects turns to be formal. And could you using some samples of Tempelhof or other project you were involved, to explain what are the necessary steps for making some informal project for being formal? How to turn something which grew up as a grassroots or bottoms up into something more strategic and formalized?
Yeah, Berlin had an extraordinary situation during the 90s because there were a lot of undeclared questions of ownership. So the whole city was informal, and this was a big opportunity for people to appropriate space. So I myself, I went into a house and I saw, well, there are some apartments empty and you could just squat the apartment. And today, this is of course a unique situation which will not come back, I'm sure, but I think that more and more cities realize that, for example, public events or informal appropriations of space that they initiated, that they make a better city. And for example, if cities make strategic plans, they should discuss where they should open experimental spaces in future. And for me, for example, this is a perfect space to come up with this idea, and I think it is the task of the public municipality to create these opportunities, these informal opportunities. They can tolerate things, or they can even stimulate public activities easily, but a lot of municipalities, they do not regard this as their core job, but in future I think they should do.